Welcome to a special Creately podcast marking World Mental Health Day 2025. I'm Emma Clark, and today I'm joined by Michael Adams, a trauma and community resilience researcher based in Seattle.
Thanks, Emma. It's great to be here. Today, we're diving into how genograms, those detailed visual family maps, can reveal the invisible emotional impact that disasters leave behind.
Exactly. When floods or conflicts strike, we usually track the physical damage, buildings, infrastructure, but the emotional aftershocks are harder to see. That's where disaster trauma mapping comes in. Let's explore how genograms are helping visualize the invisible. Okay, so when a disaster, like a big flood or maybe conflict, when it hits, we're pretty quick to track the physical stuff, right? The buildings, the infrastructure.
Yeah, that's the immediate focus.
hmm
But what often gets missed, initially anyway, is the invisible toll.
The trauma, the fear, the sort of ripples of stress through families and whole communities.
Exactly. And that invisible psychological fallout, well, it really needs its own map. So today we're digging into something called disaster trauma mapping.
Okay.
And a key tool here is the genogram. Now, this isn't just your average family tree. Think of it more like a detailed schematic.
A schematic, how so?
It maps out emotional connections, conflicts, losses. It's used to actually track how psychological injury spreads after a major event.
Right, so it's visualizing the unseen damage. What's really striking, I think, is how this kind of map can be a shortcut.
A huge shortcut, yeah.
Instead of just casting a wide net with support, you can see almost instantly who's really struggling and also where the strengths are, where people are coping well.
Precisely. Take that flood example we looked at. A genogram could quickly show, say, a grandparent with really high anxiety versus maybe a teenager who's actually doing okay because they've got good friends, solid peer support.
So you know exactly where to target help. Limited resources go where they're needed most, like right away.
Exactly. Which brings us to the how. How do we actually build this map? It starts with a basic structure, sure, but the real insight comes from adding what we call trauma indicators.
Trauma indicators, okay.
So that the visual part becomes, well, analytical. It's the language of the map.
So we've got the basic layout: squares for males, circles for females, the usual family tree stuff. How do we then, layer on the trauma information? It's not just writing trauma next to a name, is it?
Oh, definitely not. It's much more specific. For example, a diagonal line cutting through a symbol. That means loss, a death.
Okay.
A dashed outline around someone might mean they've been displaced, had to relocate. Then you use colors, maybe icons, to show specific responses like severe anxiety, perhaps PTSD symptoms, or even social withdrawal.
Got it. So visual codes for different impacts. But you mentioned relationships, too. It's not just individuals in isolation.
Absolutely crucial. The map also shows the quality of the connections between people.
How do you visualize, whether a relationship is helping or hurting?
Through the lines connecting people. Solid lines usually mean supportive, strong relationships. Those are your points of resilience, really.
Anchors.
Yeah, anchors. But if you see zigzag lines or maybe dashed lines connecting people, that signals tension, conflict, maybe estrangement, stuff that often gets worse after a disaster.
Right. And that shows you immediately where the family or social system is under the most strain.
Precisely. You see the weak points visually.
Okay. So putting it all together, the individuals, the indicators, the relationship quality, this is where the real analysis happens, right? Looking for patterns.
Yes. The snapshot is useful, but the power is in seeing the story over time.
Yeah.
Spotting those recurring issues or complex dynamics.
And what's the biggest pattern that jumps out from these maps, typically?
Well, often the most profound and maybe the toughest is generational trauma.
Ah, okay. How trauma echoes down the years.
Exactly. That source we read on civil conflict showed this so clearly. The genogram could trace it. A great-grandfather comes back from conflict with untreated PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
That impacts his son, the grandfather, who maybe develops his own symptoms, perhaps turns to alcohol to cope. You see that chain visually.
Wow. So it stops being just a theory and becomes this visible, documented line of suffering passing through the family.
And that makes it undeniable. It
Wow.
shows you need interventions that don't just treat one person, but address the whole family system, sometimes across generations.
And it pushes you to look even wider, too, right? Not just the immediate family.
Definitely. These maps can and often should include the broader support network, close friends, neighbors, maybe community groups or religious affiliation,
Why bring those in?
to spot gaps. Where are the resources thin on the ground? But also, where are the pockets of strong community resilience that maybe aren't immediately obvious? It gives you a fuller picture of the whole environment.
So let's talk application. So what? How does this detailed mapping actually change things on the ground?
It directly shapes policy and intervention. So if a map shows lots of, say, those zigzag conflict lines, and it overlaps with people losing jobs because they were displaced,
Okay.
then the response isn't just generic mental health leaflets. It might trigger immediate financial aid reviews for those specific families, coupled with targeted family counseling, much more specific.
So it helps agencies use their emergency resources much more effectively. They can see the need structurally, almost geographically within the community.
Yeah, optimizing the response.
Okay, so this holds real promise for making recovery efforts, well, smarter and more targeted. But collecting this kind of information, really intimate details about people's pain, their conflicts, it
Yeah,
feels sensitive.
extremely sensitive. And that leads us to the big final thought, really. A challenge for anyone using this.
Which,
How do you balance that clear, urgent need for this kind of data, data that makes interventions better, that informs policy, with the absolute ethical necessity of getting informed consent, being culturally sensitive, and just interacting respectfully with people who are already deeply distressed?
right, that tension between the analytical goal and the human reality on the ground.
Exactly. Finding that balance,
Mhm.
doing it ethically and effectively, that's the ongoing challenge you need to think about.